To do what it is, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jed Meshew, and this is MMA Fighting's UFC 241 post-fight live chat. So, just to kind of let you guys know what's up here, obviously UFC 241 just finished. In fact, they're still kind of wrapping up the post-fight interviews in the cage, and we're just trying to give you an opportunity to chat, get your feelings out about there while we wait for the post-fight presser to come. So, it's going to be you and me hanging out talking through the fights. So you kind of lead the discussion here, whatever you guys want to talk about. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about. Going to run through very quickly what just happened, and then we'll just jump into it, okay? So UFC 241. Main event, Daniel Cormier is no longer your heavyweight champion. Stipe Miocic gets the TKO stoppage in the fourth round. Great fight. I'm sure we're going to talk about it. In your co-main event, Nate Diaz takes a unanimous decision over Anthony Pettis. In the other major fight on the main card, Paulo Costa takes a very close, very competitive, very fun unanimous decision over Yoel Romero. Rounding out the main card, Sadiq Youssef got a knockout of Gabriel Benitez, and Derek Brunson takes a unanimous decision over Ian Heinisch. I'm definitely screwing that up, and I'm sorry that I am. So let's kind of jump into it, I guess, right now. Whatever you guys want to talk about, go for it and wow me. I guess the first thing we want to talk about here is who won the main. Stipe Miocic won the main. He is your new UFC heavyweight champion. And it was an impressive performance. I don't want to bag on him because people already think I hate on Miocic too much, and it's hard to kind of bag on that performance. I think he was down 3 rounds going into it, and in the fourth, he did what champions do. He made an adjustment. Probably should have made the adjustment before the fourth round, but it didn't matter because as soon as he did, he started targeting the body with really strong left hooks, kind of the best body work we've ever seen from Miocic. And Cormier had no answer for it. He ate a bunch of those shots in a row, clearly drained him, clearly hurt him, and then a couple right hands, had him on the ropes, backed him up against the fence, and that's the ball game. So incredible performance from Miocic. You know, he sat out for a year, said that he deserved an immediate rematch, that, you know, that first fight was a fluke. I don't think, considering what we just watched, we can consider that first fight a fluke. Maybe the way that it went, such an early knockout was less than normal, I guess. But, I mean, Cormier was dominating that fight until Miocic won the fight. I think it's just fair to say they're two closely contested fighters. And if Cormier doesn't retire, I think a trilogy fight's almost certainly up next. DC takes the rubber match. Oh, yeah, I completely got the Diaz fight wrong. But, yeah, I think I would still pick DC in the rubber match just because the way he was winning was pretty obvious and pretty clear. I think he has unknown adjustments he can make heading into it, but I'll be interested to see if it happens. I thought going into this that Cormier was going to retire kind of regardless of the outcome. Not sure if he wants to go out, on a loss like that, or if he wants to try and reclaim the title and then go out. If he wants to stay, I find it hard to believe they don't just make the immediate rematch unless John Jones changes his mind and decides, I do want to jump up for that heavyweight title fight. You're right. What I think means nothing. We're just here to chat, but you've tuned in to listen to me, so I guess that's where we are. DC looked out of shape. He considered himself won before the fight started. DC kind of always looks out of shape. I mean, it just sort of is the way he carries. Even at 205, he has a little bit of softness around the middle. For a long time, people said he can make middleweight, and it's probably just unreasonable, and that's just sort of his body type. I mean, Fedor Emelianenko is the greatest heavyweight of all time, and he kind of looked very similar for his entire career. But I do think maybe DC was out of shape. I don't know. He definitely seemed to get tired. So it's just interesting. Do I think Romero was robbed? Look, anyone who knows me at all knows that I'm among the biggest Yoel Romero fans in the world, and I don't think what you can call a robbery. I was doing the live blogs for MMA Fighting, and I scored it 30-27 Romero at the time. Kind of looking back on it, I think it should have been 29-28 Romero. I gave him the first round largely because I thought he was really tagging up Costa until the nut shot. And so then I sort of think I just gave it to him sort of in spite of what should have happened. I have no issues with that scorecard. 29-28 Costa is completely reasonable. It was a close fight. My biggest issue with that fight is it wasn't 5 rounds. I don't know why it wasn't 5 rounds. I think we all deserved 5 rounds. Yoel was robbed. Not sure. What's your feedback on Diaz? I don't know what feedback you can have other than that was a sensational performance by Nate Diaz. I thought Pettis was going to beat him. Nick is the better pressure fighter of the Diaz brothers. Nate is better off the counter. But Nate looked like he didn't miss a step. I also thought the kind of 3-year layoff wouldn't hinder him a lot, but he even mentioned in his post-fight speech that he tends to be a little bit of a slow starter. And so I thought that with the 3-year layoff would kind of hurt him, and it didn't hurt him at all. He won all 3 rounds. He dominated. Probably could have gotten a finish in the third if he hadn't started going for the submissions there. So tremendous fight, and I cannot wait for Diaz Masvidal. That's one of the 3 best fights that we can have in MMA. Pettis looks like he only wins if he gets lucky. That's just actively not true. Ngannou is going to murk Stipe. I don't know if that fight happens. If that's the fight that happens next at heavyweight, I'm going to be really interested because Stipe obviously won the first one pretty handily. Ngannou's done very well since then. And the reality is we don't know much about Francis Ngannou as a fighter. He keeps beating people so quickly. We're not really sure about a lot of the aspects of his game. So I guess we might get a chance to find out. And I'm happy for kind of whatever happens next in the heavyweight division. That was a great performance by Stipe. Stipe looks sloppy tonight. Yeah, a little bit. But I think that also kind of just is the nature of the heavyweight beast. He's fighting a guy who was quicker than him, who was giving him a lot of problems early. But regardless of how sloppy he is, he did the thing champions do. He made an adjustment. He, dug down deep. It was a gritty performance. And look, one of the other things we're not talking about, Stipe doesn't have a great track record of late stoppages. Most of his stoppages is he's getting are early finishes, or something he's been beating a guy up for the entire fight. I think Mark Hunt. He doesn't have even against Ngannou, he was beating the hell out of Ngannou for the better part of 25 minutes, and he still couldn't stop him. So him turning it on like that to get a knockout victory when he probably needed a knockout to win, that's a sensational performance. Is this guy Matt Mitrione? I am not Matt Mitrione. Stipe fought bad until the 4th. I agree. He didn't make any adjustments, and that was kind of the thing that was most shocking to me. I did like the takedown he went for, I think, in the 3rd. I think just doing that, he didn't have a lot of success with it. But, Frankie Edgar made a career out of mixing things up or is continuing to make a career out of mixing things up. So I definitely think that's a great look for Stipe to do that as well. DC is always ready to cry. I mean, it's okay. Wow, a lot of hate on DC here. DC didn't prepare for body punches. That alone lost him the fight. You're 100% correct. He didn't prepare for body punches, and that alone did lose him the fight. He wasn't ready for that adjustment at all. And even after that adjustment came, he didn't adjust himself. I thought kind of as soon as it was pretty obvious that at that point Miocic was just hammering the left hook to the body. And I thought maybe we might see Cormier make some shots, do something else, try anything else. He didn't. He just kind of wore it. And bad look for Cormier. We are reading the comments. It's just kind of how it goes. DC thought it would be a cakewalk. I kind of feel like that might be true, actually. He came in looking very unconcerned, and for the better part of the fight, it seemed like that was not completely wrong for him. He was handling it very well. I did think the commentary in the 2nd round was a bit off. He was rolling a lot of Stipe's punches, but he was getting hit by a lot of things too. And he did seem a little cavalier in there, and ultimately that may have been what, or at least an additional factor that made him pay the price. Colby in enemy territory. Man, did you hear the pop Colby Covington got? I guess it's not a pop because it was just raucous boos, but people hate him. His stick has worked out. Whether that's going to convert into people paying to watch him potentially lose or not, like a lot of people ended up doing with Mayweather or the history of pro wrestling, that remains to be seen, but he's definitely found his niche. Stipe's coaches need to be interviewed. I think they may have not pushed him to add weapons. I think that's totally fair. He didn't look like he had anything different coming into this fight, and maybe that's just a personal choice that he made, that he doesn't think he needs to add any tools. He thought that the tools he had were good, or he wanted to sharpen them up. At the end of the day, he still won the fight, so it's kind of tough to argue with the results, but it would have been nice to see him have kind of a different game plan. He did seem at least to be more prepared for the clinch. Every time they got into any kind of clinching, he was just completely afraid maybe not the right word, but completely prepared to hand fight and get away as quickly as possible. So that at least is a little bit of a new thing. Stipe lost both fights, didn't lose both fights, definitely won this. Masvidal versus Nate. I think this is what we should all be talking about because what a fight. mentioned a minute ago, Nate Diaz looked sensational, obviously. Pettis, rightly or wrongly, was ranked highly at welterweight, basically just off the one win. In fact, just off the one win. So Nate does kind of get to jump the line here. He's going to get that boost for that. Masvidal is probably the outside of a title shot. You could argue to put him in over Covington, but seems like they're going to do Usman Covington, and Masvidal Diaz is a perfect fight. Leon Edwards, once again, left out in the cold. I guess he'll probably end up getting to fight Tyron Woodley, but Masvidal Diaz, it's just going to be one of those things where they both are really good at everything. I'm just trying to kind of wrap my head around the style matchup. I think it'll be really fun. And the mic work beforehand. Nate Diaz is one of the most effortlessly kind of cool dudes in the UFC, and so is Jorge Masvidal. So that's a treat for all of us, and we should be so lucky for it to happen. Covington deserves it 10 times more than 2-2 Masvidal. Yes, Colby Covington 100% deserves a welterweight title shot. The sport has very little to do with what you deserve. And at the moment in time, Jorge Masvidal is a much bigger star than Colby Covington. It's just kind of how it is. And so there is a world in which he gets to leapfrog Colby Covington for a title shot. Colby Covington is not some guy that the UFC even seems to love. Frankly, he's been passed up for 2 title shots before for trying to make them bend to his will. If he bucks back in any way, I can totally see them just being like, hey, George, get in there. Diaz versus Masvidal, I need Masvidal and McGregor. Masvidal and McGregor is just not going to happen. It's a terrible fight for McGregor. Stylistically, it's a tough one for him. And even though Masvidal is kind of a star now, it doesn't really add a lot for McGregor. I'm interested to see what will happen with McGregor. But tonight's not a night to talk about Conor McGregor. For the first time, maybe ever, it's a night to not talk about Conor McGregor. Will Nick come back? Nick Diaz Army. I don't think Nick Diaz is coming back. He's been gone forever at this point. And that's fine. We have Nate, and Nate seems like he's ready to get back in there, hopefully by the end of the year, maybe early next year against Masvidal, and that's more than enough for any of us. Ferguson versus Diaz. Yeah, that would be a tremendous fight. You can take most of the action fighters in that 170, 155, even 145 weight range and be incredible. Do Ferguson, Max Holloway. That's incredible. Do Max Holloway versus Nate Diaz. I know that there's a pretty big size disparity there, but that'd be fun as hell. There's just too many fun options. Who you think won the Costa Yoel fight? I think Yoel won 2-1, but I'm not mad about the Costa win. I think Yoel kind of did a lot more work towards the head. Obviously, Costa was working the body, but I just liked what Yoel did a lot. I think kind of similar to the Stipe DC fight, in where it looks, especially in that second round, Stipe landed a lot of shots, but his shots were getting glanced off and rolled by DC. I thought Romero was doing a tremendous job defending Costa's shots in that second round, and maybe didn't get enough play from the judges for that, because he was also countering back and landing actual shots. So I had Romero winning. I'm not upset with that. I wish they fought 5 rounds, and I think if they do fight 5 rounds, Costa looked like he was getting close to being totally spent. But guess we'll never know, and we'll see what happens next. Hopefully, Yoel moves up to 205. I think there's some interesting fights there for him. DC won, definitely didn't win. DC threw Stipe in the air like a ragdoll. He did, and then he totally got away from the wrestling. He shot one more time the rest of the fight, and I think that's a thing that he's going to kick himself about kind of when he looks back on this tomorrow, and maybe that's something he'll regret for quite some time. He had pretty easy success in that first round. I know the first round's not the same as the third or the fourth round. They're slippery. It's tired. Just things are different. But I think it's going to be a thing that kind of eats at him, because he took Stipe down, and once he took him down, he stayed down. He was in control. He could have soaked up a lot more clock, and maybe, like some of the other viewers were mentioning, maybe he just felt a little too confident on the feet, and so he didn't feel like he needed to. But at the end of the day, he probably did need to, because he got knocked out. Didn't throw him around. It looked awkward. Definitely threw him around. 100% lifted him and chucked him. Will there be a trilogy fight? Probably not. I think DC retires. If he doesn't retire, almost certainly there's a trilogy. You're not going to do DC versus John Jones with DC coming off a loss. That makes no sense. So if DC wants to fight one more time, it's this fight, or he hangs it up. I still think he's going to hang it up. He's 40 years old. He's had a hell of a career. He can just walk off into the sunset here. Why didn't Stipe throw a damn jab? Great question. He didn't throw a lot of them. And then in the third round, when he was having his most success in that round, I thought it was because he was kind of dictating range a little better, staying on the outside. My best guess is because Cormier's jab was more active and quicker, and so it just kind of threw Stipe off. But it's a question for him. Maybe he'll address it in the post-fight presser. Romero did wow. A lot of fans in the chat here saying Romero got robbed, and obviously the entire audience just booed their heads off as soon as that was announced. I just don't think you can call it a robbery. It was a super close fight. Like I said, I think Romero won. I think he has an argument to have won all 3 rounds and probably did win rounds 2 and 3, but close fight. You can't be that mad about it. And frankly, the Costa versus the winner of Izzy Whitaker, it's going to be a great fight. So it's fun all the way around. There's nothing really wrong with what happened there. Costa was well. Dana White. Ooh, that's Luke Thomas live chat. Yep, I'm sure it is. DC broke his jaw. Wouldn't surprise me at all if that happened. I'm not listening to any of the kind of the post-fight stuff because obviously I'm here doing this with y'all. But I mean, he hit a lot of shots. Stipe fought bad and found a solution. I think that's probably correct. Feels weird to say that about the guy who ended up winning and is now, by title, the baddest man on the planet. But I didn't love the way he fought his first 3 rounds, but I love the way he fought his 4th, and that's kind of all that mattered at the end of the day. Yoel won all glancing blows. They weren't all glancing blows. Yoel ate a lot of good shots too, especially body kicks. Costa's body kicks were doing a lot of work on Yoel, but he's just one of the toughest men of all time. And so he was able to kind of no-sell a lot of that. But I really think that the nut shot in the first round is interesting to me because it looked like Romero had Costa on the ropes or at least in a very dangerous position. And then I know Costa was going for a knee. I don't think it was an intentional shot, but that completely disrupted the rhythm. And so maybe things would have been different with that. Would have been interesting to see. No, the judges should not be executed. That's terrible. Bones versus Stipe. I started thinking about this around round 2 when DC started doing that thing where he put his hands down and was getting hit a lot more than he should have been. I think John Jones just beats the hell out of both of those men. Stipe Miocic is obviously a good fighter. So is Daniel Cormier. They're both great fighters. Even considering his last fight against Thiago Santos, after that fight, I was actually a little more interested in Jones at heavyweight because he seems so reticent to get into firefights with guys with knockout power like Santos has. So I thought maybe moving up to heavyweight, he might be a little more scared. They might have more opportunities. But I think if DC puts his hands down like that, he's going to get picked apart on the outside. And I just don't think Miocic has the tools, frankly. He's pretty limited as a fighter. His head stays completely stationary on defense. And I just think John Jones is probably the best fighter in the world right now. So I would love to see John Jones, Francis Ngannou, if Francis Ngannou can beat Stipe, because then that's a hell of a fight. But otherwise, I feel pretty confident John Jones is beaten up by everybody at heavyweight. DC should retire now. I agree. I think that's just totally what should happen. What else does he have to prove? If he comes back and beats DC, or comes back and beats Stipe to reclaim the title, I guess that's a nice little cherry on his career, but I think you just walk away here. He's one of the 10, 15 best fighters of all time, and he's probably the best commentator. So, guys, I'm going to have to dip out now because the UFC post-fight presser is about to start. Keep it locked here on MMAfighting.com for the post-fight presser, our UFC 241 post-fight show, interviews with all the fighters, and just any other coverage of UFC 241. Thanks for hanging out with me. Have a good night, and I hope you enjoyed the fights.